Time for the weekly update. Malcolm Hoenlein is with us, Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. We call this the weekly update on a Friday at JM in the AM. Mr. Hoenlein, welcome back to JM in the AM.
Thank you. Always good to be with you. And good Chodesh to everyone. And Hanukkah coming soon, so there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
No, that's for sure. You always sound so upbeat. It's amazing. So incredible. Are you upbeat about the meeting that's going to take place in Washington today between the president and the mayor-elect of the city of New York?
Look, everybody hopes that good things will come to New York, and I think the president cares about New York, lived here, invested here, grew up here, but I have very little hope about this mayor-elect, and we saw yesterday again the attack on the Nefesh B'Nefesh event, which discusses Aliyah, and he talked about a possible violation of international law. You don't hear him talking about the Islamic violations of blatant violation of international law, but the very fact that after the election, after everything, telling he wants to deal with the Jewish community and everything, to come up with a statement like that really betrays the true nature of what we can expect. And so I hope the president, who called him a communist in announcing the meeting, will put the markers down and make clear to him. I think it's regrettable that the governor couldn't come out before the election and tell the truth that they can't afford to do the things he promised to do, and let the fiction ride so that he gets elected. And I hope for all the people, and it's a warning I'm sounding everywhere, and I think it's so critical. Jews should stop talking about Mamdani. We have to show that he's bad for New York, bad for America, not just bad for Jews. And that, we should speak up about it. But I think the context, because we see that it doesn't resonate. And, there are all lies about what percentage, and it's something we've discussed over and over again. And I kept saying that numbers are talking about are wrong. You saw the poll this week that showed overwhelmingly, like in the 70, 80%, 70s, high 70s at least, that Jews recognize he's a danger to them. Jews in New York recognize that he is a danger to them. Do you think they voted for him if they knew that and knowing that? So I believe the number is much lower than people say. The turnout in our communities was very strong, and it should be a lesson. And we should start yesterday organizing for next year, when you have very important elections coming up in New York City, New York State, assemblies and governor and all the other positions that are going to come up.
As in the House, isn't the full House next year?
And the full House, I was going to come to it. And in addition, you have the full House coming up, as it does every 2 years, and senators get 6 years. So we have a lot of work to do, and what we showed could be done this year has to be have a multiplier effect. And everybody continuing, the schools continuing to make sure that there are vehicles for the synagogues, every community, we can still make a huge difference. Now, with the turnout that was there, it's still a large portion of the Jewish community doesn't register and isn't voting. Maybe now they learned the lesson of what it means to sit on your hands and not be out there, and we have to reform it. This is a dangerous trend. There are 40 people like him got elected around the country, but 800 Muslims ran for office. Muslims can run for office, but not radical, and not those who have this transformational agenda to impose Islamist ideology. And they're very open in many places about it. And they talk about Sharia law even in places. Yep. And I cannot stress enough the significance and the importance of this moment and of this time. And saying we're going to run to Florida or Texas, that's not the answer. And and for most people, it's not a possibility. So we have to strengthen our position here, protect our institutions, challenge the elected officials, and demand that our rights are protected. And no excuses, no feting this guy as long as he maintains the positions that he has.
You saw what happened in Dearborn this week. I mean, the Christian communities are starting to actually organize and protest, fearing what might be happening down the road. I don't know if it's too little, too late. I don't know what their position has been in general as all this has been going on. But there are a lot of very angry people out there, including Senator Schumer. And aside from his, policies that we disagree with, which are many, he announced and this comes from his office, by the way. This is his language, the office of his language. I just want your reaction. Leader Schumer announced he'll be introducing a resolution condemning anti-Semitism and white supremacy following the rights embrace of Nick Fuentes. Your reaction to this development?
It's a gesture. We need legislation. We need to see the Education Department of Justice, which have been much better now. And I sat last night with a president of a university, college, and he acknowledged, though clearly not a supporter of the president that's in the election, the change that has taken place because of it, and the penalties that have been imposed, and the raising the profile and holding people to account. That's what we need. We need to see legislation. There are bills pending that Schumer did not advance in the past. We have to get the IRA definition ensconced in every single place that we can, city, state, and federal level, so that we have a standard by which to measure people. But what's really important now is that if there's legislation, there has to be consequences, penalties that are imposed, that when our public schools are being used as propaganda bases as they are today, we have to have restrictions on foreign funding. We want to see the Muslim Brotherhood and CARE registered as foreign terrorist organizations. I want to see that legislation from him, and I would be much happier.
Also, there's a news story, and again, just looking for your reaction in terms of the irony or in terms of the way things turn so quickly, and it's so hard to keep up sometimes. Mahmoud Khalil was, of course, detained by ICE. It was a big, high-profile story. Was in prison for a while, etc. And now he's out, and he's suing the Trump administration that for information that led to his arrest, etc. It's sort of like a circle of events that you can't keep up with. You know what I mean by that?
Yes. Yeah, it is a circle.
One day he's the villain, the next day now he's the hero in the media, and especially because he's anti-Trump, and now there's a legal case, and who knows how the judges are going to decide about that. I mean, a minute ago we thought that we'd never see him again and he'd be deported, and now he's going to turn out to be an activist leader again.
We see, and it has to do with the revolving door of justice policies that have been adopted, but more than that, if we don't recognize the danger that he poses to American society, and again, I want to emphasize, I think we should not talk about the dangers to Jews per se. It should be an issue. We should be working on it, but the public posture has to be to show the American people. I mean, was 9/11 not enough of a threat? Were all the other attacks that have taken place? Look at the arrests that take place across the country for people who are plotting attacks. I mean, when it's a spectacular one, everybody, clucks for a few minutes and then it's gone. It's not the way you deal with this. This is a systemic approach that is challenging us. This is not haphazard. There's foreign money behind it, huge amounts, and extremist money behind it. We see the connections, and especially if you saw the revelations about CARE this week coming from the NCRI, the Network Contagion Research Institute's research in California, how they were taking money, federal funds that they got for relief, which didn't go for that, and for aid, and were using it to pay students who get arrested and giving stipends to students who engage in anti-Israel activities. And the more extreme, the more likely they were to get the awards. And I mean, where's the accountability? It was front page of the New York Post, and the next day it's gone. Yep. Can you imagine? I mean, you were talking about millions of dollars that are being funneled from federal funds into this. I hope that there will be full investigations, and that all those who said they would are going to actually do it. But it's one example. Think of how many like this there are going on around the country, and no accountability. Where is the accounting for all the billions that Qatar has put in? Where's the relationship with the teachers' unions, with their activities in K-12, where the most vulnerable population of children are being poisoned? And to see the results, you see that if nothing else, that it leads to indifference to attacks against Jews and Zionists and certainly about Israel, that young people who know nothing, more than 67% did not know of Gen Z, as they call them, and that age cohort, did not know 6 million died in the Shoah.
Right. More
than half couldn't identify Auschwitz. And in the general population, it's more than half. that don't know about the 6 million and the history. So we take for granted that people know and that they'll be moved by it and stuff. And the answer is they don't know. Of course, they care about affordability. And I think Mamdani simply would throw out these pieces of red meat, get everybody jumping all over that. In the meantime, he would campaign on affordability and the debate, which as it affected people, because they say, listen, I can't afford my apartment, my house, transportation. And that hits home and it motivated them. And they said also, I spoke to some experts this week because I'm very energized about this, as you can see, because I see the future trend is only downward. That they said that the young people said it was the vibe of Mandano and the campaign, that they were excited by it, that there was, he motivated them, and it was very cleverly done. And again, people should understand this is not haphazard. This is very cleverly planned, and as it is across the country.
I worry because, you mentioned the Nefesh B'Nefesh protest this week, and someone actually made a comment, and no one's more familiar with this than you are when it comes to protests and arranging demonstrations, etc. Do the police usually take these groups, further away from the point of contention, further away from the entrance to the synagogue, while in this case they were directly across the street or directly in front? Is it usually the case, and you know this because you've arranged so many demonstrations, that you're moved at least a block away?
It's usually not allowed right in front of a house of worship. They do try to move them away, but across the street, as you know, is the Russian mission to the United Nations.
Right.
So they're protecting that, and I think that this is a discussion that should be held with the police commissioner, who's certainly sensitive to all of this. But then the free speech people come in, they bring in their lawyers, and they say they're allowed to be within X feet, and they're allowed to have, their signs, and even if it comes to point of harassment. I was at an event at MoMA, and I'm telling you, it was hard to get in, and they were allowed to have barriers up to the doors.
Well, we'll see what happens. The police commissioner is staying on, as you indicated, and obviously there's a sensitivity there to the Jewish community. And frankly, the bottom line when it comes to public safety is whether the police are motivated, if they're mobilized, whether it's by the mayor or others in specific situations to actually go and do what needs to be done to, quote unquote, keep the peace. And we have to pray that, in fact, our safety for our community and all communities will be maintained even during the new administration. One thing from this side of the world before we start talking about the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, one more thing. Did you see this? Because you mentioned funding, et cetera. You saw that the state of Texas government has been utilizing public funds and funneling them to Islamic organizations?
The state of Texas?
Yeah.
State of Texas is the most advanced and most, Governor Abbott is the most responsive. He did declare the Muslim Brotherhood and then seem to be foreign terrorist organizations. I'm not surprised that any money that being funneled to entities because they have supporters within governments, but I don't know the specifics of Texas allocating money to. They are, in fact, the most alert and most responsive in the country.
Texas state government gives $13 million to Islamist mosques.
No, the mosque is a different story, but yes, there's and the problem is not the giving the money if it's going for food programs, stuff like that. But the question is, what's the scrutiny? How do we monitor where that money goes? And it reflects the fact that the Muslim populations are growing everywhere, even in Texas, where, because we're close to the border. And how many times did we warn over the last 20 years about the messages I'd gotten from security people, from people on the border telling me that Muslims, guys are coming across, they're all young, they're all, fit, coming across the border and melding into societies, and especially in Texas, changing their names to Hispanic names. This is 20 years ago we talked about it, 15 years ago we talked about it. So, of course, this is the net result. And one thing about the police, I just want to say that we're very grateful that Jessica Tisch is staying on. It's the most hopeful sign we've had about this. But also look at the recruitment for the police department. So many are leaving, and they have to recruit a lot of people. Who's coming into the department? How do we have to make sure that there's a proper kind of training and stuff, that that the people who come in don't fit the mold of young people who accept and supported the extremist positions.
Good point. It's America's one and only Jewish Moments in the Morning radio program. Heard and listener-sponsored digital radio around the world at NachumSegal.com, on the Nachum Segal Network, and, of course, in the beloved NSN app. Malcolm Hoenlein is with us. I remind everybody that this coming Tuesday is our Giving Tuesday for our year-end campaign. Give generously at fjbunity.org, fjbunity.org, and keep us going. All right, Malcolm, a lot of us have been watching the proceedings at the White House this week. President Trump, leader of Saudi Arabia. Okay, I'll give you the floor. How would you describe today's relationship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia and today's relationship between Israel and Saudi Arabia?
Okay, so these are obviously very complicated relationships. The Saudis have played this very smart. They put forward their agenda of things that they wanted, including getting the F-35s, which is a game changer, and getting 43, I think, of them, which is more than Israel has. And supposedly they're not getting the ones that Biden talking about, the dumbed down one. They're talking about equivalent to what Israel has. Israel has been somewhat muted in its response to this, but we don't know all the details. We don't know what conditions have been applied. I know that they said they're not going to be parked at Tobruk, which is close to Israel. I mean, in the case of the F-35, it's a difference of minutes. And I think strengthening the relationship with Saudi Arabia is important, and it's balancing. And I did not anticipate that they were going to come out and announce that they were going to join the Abraham Accord. As you know, I've long argued that the more we make them the focal point of all of this, the more they're going to raise the price for it.
Right.
And the president clearly is enamored with them, and the pomp and circumstance that surrounded the visit and the state dinner, I think, reflect all of that. And, of course, the $1 trillion investment, in addition to the fact that he has that supposedly they've been talking about business interests that they have in these countries. So it's a combination of a lot of factors that we have to see how it sorts out. I have talked to MBS. I think overall he wants peace. He wants to benefit from what Israel has to offer. He knows he needs it. And we want to build up the quote moderate wing, but now if he gets it, the F-35s, does that mean that Turkey gets it? Does Saudi Arabia play a bigger role in the Gaza reconstruction? And we know that they are playing a role more and more in Syria, in part to balance off Iran, which is good, but it's also that they're expanding their influence. Remember that you have the Shiite-Sunni conflict going, and many of them realize, including Saudi Arabia, that what Israel did was fighting a war that is aimed at them as well, and that while Israel's the first target, they know they're next, and they have said it to me many times and want to see Hamas decimated and destroyed, because they know ultimately it's a threat to them, and they know Iran is a threat, and even though they play games diplomatically and otherwise, the reality is known. So how this all will play out long term, obviously there's a lot of reason for concern about, when Saudi Arabia is getting most advanced weapons, because, and not because of MBS, but because somebody who might succeed him. There could be a revolution. We know that governments change in some of these countries by revolution, not by election. So and to think that there's a pot of gold at the end of this, that it's going to be easy transformation. It's not. I believe that ultimately Saudi Arabia will, and there is a lot of quiet exchanges and things, and I want to see the relationship with Saudi Arabia bolstered, but we have to think also, what is the message to the other countries now? And will UAE, which was turned down for the advanced F-35s, will they now get it? I mean, they have proven themselves much more during this period, during the war, where they didn't stop one flight, where they have really stood by very strongly. Will they be entitled to it as well? Let alone, as I said, Turkey, which to me would be a great
Have
finish.
either of these countries made a financial commitment to Gaza? Like, has Saudi Arabia, or we always talk about Saudi Arabian money and UAE money, and you just mentioned how Saudi Arabia would love to eliminate Hamas, and frankly, that could take a financial investment in the area in order to, achieve that goal. Have any of these countries made a real commitment to President Trump or otherwise when it comes to finances for the Gaza rebuild?
what we have seen in public statements recently is that they're not going to commit troops. But they don't need them for the troops. They need them for the financing.
Right.
As you see, there's a lot of training going on. There's a lot of other things, and we have to see will be control. I think Gaza could easily end up being divided, with Israel retaining the area that it has as a responsibility until ultimately there's some configuration arrived at that will protect Israel. But currently we see Hamas rebuilding, we see Hezbollah rebuilding, and certainly Iran and Pickaxe Mountain rebuilding its facilities for enriching, which means that and although they don't have water, they're talking about moving their capital from Tehran because of the drought. They literally don't have water. And I don't know if you know, but their irrigation system and their water system was built by Israeli engineers who went there during the Shah's time and built it. And there were so many, they even started a Hebrew school there for the kids of these engineers, because they were there for several years helping to develop the system. The newspapers in Iran were running stories saying the reason we have the drought is because you kicked the Israelis out, and there was nobody to maintain it. Literally, at night they have no water. There are daytime hours, no water, and the reservoirs that serve Tehran are drying up. They're doing cloud seeding and all sorts of emergency measures, trying to compensate. But in the meantime, the money still goes into Pickaxe Mountain to rebuild their nuclear enrichment capacity, and they don't allow any inspections by the IAEA there. So Iran is looking to rebuild. We know that Hezbollah is against smuggling weapons and reorganizing, and Hamas is training and trying to enlist people. The vast majority of the Gazans live in the area under Hamas control, and it's inevitable then we're going to continue to see the cross yellow line raids by Israel. And they just uncovered, did you see that? This huge, the biggest tunnel, with 80 rooms, let alone multiple outlets, let alone the facilities inside this tunnel that ran for kilometer after kilometer.
Gaza's fancier underground than overground.
Yeah, some of it, we don't see. Nobody goes in and shows the pictures, and you saw the lies that are constantly being refuted, that there's starvation again, that Israel's holding up trucks. Today, the United States came out and said, we're sending in 646 trucks a day. I mean, you saw that the UN Health Organization came out and said that the problem in Gaza is obesity, that they're too fat, and that they're much more obese than Israelis. Right. And this is the country that's or an area under starvation.
But in terms of the rebuild, based on the way you just described the Hamas attempt to rebuild the way they want to rebuild their area, it's the UAE or Saudi Arabian investment in that area would be irrelevant. Am I right or wrong? Like, is there any amount of money or any strategy based on the finances that could possibly get Hamas out of that area?
What they're doing is they're training some of the clans and the militias that are against Hamas. And, this was a tactic that was used in the past, which led to Hamas's emergence. Right. But that the European officials, I know, were saying this week that they're trying to implement the next phase of the plan, and that it was essentially stalled, and reconstruction looked like it will only take place on Israel's side of the yellow line. So if, in fact, they are able successfully to recruit a counter force, but as long as Gaza, the majority of the population is under the foot of Hamas, it's not going to emerge, and they are going to continue to rebuild. And Israel will have to take more steps across the yellow line. People, when you read it, understand, because the disarming is not taking place. And once there's a security force in there, it's going to be much more difficult. But they're not holding, Hamas doesn't hold up to their end of the agreement, and Israel will have to continue then to take these steps.
Right. What I'm trying to get to is that no matter what, the international community has always thought, or at least they have since President Trump started as chairman of the peace group, I forgot what he called it, they've always thought that there's a possibility that other countries will have enough influence in Gaza to actually rid them of Hamas and rebuild the area. And
this was a fiction, and you and I, we talked about it. Look at all of the factors that we still. Hamas is not disarmed. Hezbollah rearming. Syria refuses to say they're going to have peace with Israel. They want the Golan back now. The nuclear program in Iran, the missile program in Iran, Egypt militarizing the Sinai. Turkey is shifting forces into Syria and moving towards what appears to be a war footing and wants to play a more aggressive role. Qatar has been made a strategic ally with a defense pact. Now the Saudis have had it and getting the F-35s. These are all developments in the last weeks. I'm not saying that any one of them is a threat, but all of them collectively certainly are, and each one of them could emerge as a much more serious issue. So you're right. The international, we expect the international community to rise up. We still see the countries that are committing troops, even countries that have traditionally not been involved. You see Pakistan at these meetings. Other countries are there. And I think the hope is that they will send forces. But, if at the same time Hamas is able to rebuild and hide behind, its side of the yellow line and continue to rearm again, then they will not stay there if the fighting gets hot. These troops, we know in the past, they turn tail and run.
Do we have any idea what percentage of Gazans live east of the yellow line? Like how many are now under Israeli control?
Yes. I'm just trying to remember what the exact number was.
Was it significant, or was it like
it's 2/3, 1/3, I think.
Really? There's a third east of the yellow line?
40s. Most of the people are in the Hamas part of the yellow line. Now, the expectation is that the redevelopment construction will take place in the Israeli side. Maybe more will move back as housing and other things become available. But then they have to go through a vetting process. And the more attractive you make it, then the hope is that the people on the other side will start to demand those things. But there are still big areas of Gaza, that were not destroyed, that people were living in the lap of luxury with fancy stores, boutique stores of every kind, like Fifth Avenue. And that didn't all just disappear. So there is money, there is wealth there. People don't work, and they get all the aid and food is coming in from the outside. I'm not saying conditions are ideal or there aren't serious problems. There are problems, but the only way this is going to work is if Hamas is finally disarmed, those who are responsible for crimes be held to account, and that we look for a long-term solution, not short-term bandages.
Is there still pressure being put on Hamas regarding the remains of the final 3 hostages?
Yes. And the U.S. has played an important role, and thank God. I met this week with 15 of the hostages came, and I have to tell you that to listen to them, it's unbelievable to see upbeat, to see some of them, one who got out earlier, I mean, he could have been a stand-up comedian, but one of them who talked about in the tunnels on Friday night, he said the walls of the tunnels shook because they sang so loud, and they sang Zemiro together, and how some of them talked about finding, becoming more religious and saying Shema and other things in captivity. How they were able to last, you think about it, it's superhuman to be 2 years in dark tunnels, 2 years in isolation, 2 years under torture, and the physical torture, the abuse of all kinds that is coming out about what they suffered. And maybe people need to talk about it for their own sake, but also that people understand the severity of the conditions under which they were held, how they could come out. And all they do is express appreciation for everything that was done for them. And the went to the president and saw him this week and thanked him for his efforts. To me, they're superhuman.
It's unbelievable, especially since there have been people in the past who, are just shut down after a situation like that, and they're not able to speak publicly. Very difficult for them to make public appearances. Does not seem like this group is suffering from any of them. I shouldn't say they're not suffering. They're suffering terribly, but meaning that specific thing about making a public presentation and being seen, in public with others. It seems that they remarkably are able to do that, which is pretty incredible. And
but it is difficult for some of them to speak about it, and you see that some of them now are telling the story of the physical abuse that they suffered, which is unbelievable and horrific. But you're right. There are still some who cannot speak out, and there's still many who are, they need treatment, and this is, something that may come up later, that they'll need additional assistance and treatment. But I'm telling you that seeing them and listening to them, they're superheroes.
Yeah. And I don't know who's been coming to meet with you recently, but I'll tell you on this end, I have had countless meetings with people from Israel who are trying to coordinate therapy sessions for soldiers who are suffering from PTSD. And the alarming thing is not just the type of things they're suffering from, but the effects it's having on families, divorce and separation. And then on top of that, the numbers. You meet many different types of soldiers, and some of them are able to, handle everything that's been thrown their way. But it's unbelievable just how many are not able to handle it at this point, and now post the war are suffering, and God knows for how long they'll suffer if they don't get proper help.
There are many thousands, even I heard yesterday, tens of thousands, who have PTSD in some form. And some of it, as I said, emerges later on.
Right.
But, they need treatment. Some need more intensive treatment than others. It can't be ignored. It's the Army's responsibility, the government's responsibility to everyone, both civilian and military. But first and foremost, as people who were serving and, came out after what they saw and what they did, and for this long period of time, having to do it, one can understand the strain that places and being away from their families. And you're right, it has strained many marriages, understandably. So we have to make sure that all the resources possible are given to them. I think a lot of it has to do with rebuilding the economic system. You know that Israel's economy in the third quarter that just ended was up 12.5%. 12.5%. They fight for 3%. America is fighting for this year to be 3%. 12, even though the quarter before it was down a little bit.
Look, when Americans in Israel tell me they'd rather be paid in shekel than in dollar, that's something I thought I'd never hear in my life.
That's true. And then there's a thing that came out, a study done of the countries of longevity. Japan was number one. You know, number four was Israel, 83.3 years.
Wow.
What about the United States, Russia, others? Israel, despite the fact that, unfortunately, you have terrorism and stuff, and it gets blown up. But the fact is that Israelis, in all of the studies now, still, again, amongst the 10 happiest countries in the world, people being happiest, and 83.3 years. It's unbelievable. And it has to do with Israel's health system and inoculations and all sorts of things that they attribute it to. But unfortunately, that story doesn't get out enough to tell the positives and how the economy is coming back. And I think the more that people can get back to work, and if their factories work, the farms work, and we have to keep investing in it, and so that they get back to normal, that will help also in terms of the mental health of people.
What do you think of the UN Security Council adopting the 20-point peace plan? Any problem with that?
Well, I mean, we don't know anything the UN adopts worries us, but in this case, it was American-led, and I think the fact that they got it through now gives the peace board that was established with the president as chairman, it has legitimacy, and they don't have to go worry there about a Russian and China veto. Right. So the fact that they got it through the UN is very important because it sets certain parameters and ground rules, and will enable a U.S.-led committee, and the U.S. is building a base near the border, and the U.S. is engaging in other activities there. That this will be enable them to implement. A lot of the 20 points are good. There are some that are clearly of concern as well, and the rehabilitation of Gaza is a very sensitive issue. Right. Because we're going to, the Egyptians are waiting to get the building contracts. Others are also, and if you're talking about tens of billions of dollars that will be made, and that always leads to corruption. And Hamas and others will want to feed off of that trough also. So this is only the beginning of the process.
I read 4 articles this week about pay to slay. 2 said it's over. 2 said it continues. Break the tie for me, Malcolm.
it continues. What they did is that they shifted it from, the payroll, which they have done before, and they put them instead on the health dole. They do it as a Social Security type payment rather than pay to slave. So the answer is that it just continues under a different guise.
Not easy being a Jewish president of Mexico, huh?
She's not very Jewish. And she's
don't tell that to those who don't like her, because they always cite her Jewishness.
Right, but she doesn't. And no, but she's not been friendly to Israel. She's very left, and
but the enemy reminds us what we are.
Exactly what I was just going to say, that I think this has driven her closer to the community because, the accusations and the charges against her, and you're right, it's not easy. And they whip up the charge of her being Jewish. Yeah. So sometimes our enemies remind people of who they are and what their real roots are.
So true, so true. Are we doing a weekly update Thanksgiving weekend? What's your decision on that?
Happy Turkey. I'm happy to do it.
Excellent. I plan on being here. I look forward to speaking to you next week. A good Chodesh, a wonderful Shabbos, and we'll speak, please, God, next week.
God willing. Be well. Have a great Shabbos.
Malcolm Hoenlein, our weekly update, Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. Support the work we do, folks. Conversations like this whole week. Did you hear our conversation this week with Erez Mazud? Did you hear our conversation this week with Lori Finkelstein? Oh, a Jew in the City was here yesterday with an amazing conversation. We have amazing conversations, wonderful inspiration, fantastic music, and an amazing way for a community worldwide to get together on a daily basis. Pay tribute to JMAM and the Nachum Segal Network, and to give what you can at our year-end campaign. Our Big Giving Tuesday day will be this coming Tuesday. We're looking forward to that. But you can give now or anytime at fjbunity.org, fjbunity.org, or go to the very top of the page at nachumsegal.com and just click on the banner.